The campfire crackled. Flames danced in the darkness, casting long, eerie shadows around the clearing. 4 friends huddled closer, their faces lit by the warm glow. They were deep in the woods, miles from home, telling stories, laughing. But the night was young, and something watched from the trees.
Did you hear that?
The others fell silent, listening intently. The only sounds were the crackling fire and the gentle rustling of leaves.
Hear what?
A whistle. It sounded like music.
They strained their ears, but the sound was gone. The forest seemed to swallow it whole, leaving only the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. The group exchanged uneasy glances, each one silently questioning the other if they had truly heard it. The silence felt heavier now, filled with unseen eyes and the weight of the unknown. Every shadow seemed to move, every branch seemed to whisper secrets. The fog thickened, wrapping around them like a shroud, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Mark tossed another log onto the fire, sparks flying up into the night sky like frightened fireflies. The flames roared to life, casting long, dancing shadows on the trees around them. The warmth was a small comfort against the growing chill in the air.
Probably just an owl. He tried to sound nonchalant, but his voice wavered slightly. The others nodded, but their eyes betrayed their doubt.
He said, trying to sound brave. But the fear was palpable, hanging in the air like the mist that surrounded them. Each one of them felt it, a gnawing unease that they couldn't quite shake off. But even he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The forest, usually so full of life, seemed eerily still. Every creak of a branch, every rustle of leaves made them jumpy and on edge. The air felt colder, charged with a strange energy. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Their breaths came out in visible puffs, mingling with the mist that clung to the ground, and then they heard it again. A faint, distant whistle, cutting through the silence like a knife. This time there was no mistaking it. It was real, and it was getting closer. A high-pitched, haunting melody weaving its way through the trees. It was a sound that didn't belong, a sound that sent shivers down their spines. They looked around trying to pinpoint its source, but the forest seemed to play tricks on their senses. Closer this time. The melody grew louder, more insistent, as if calling out to them. They stood frozen, hearts pounding, as the eerie tune enveloped them, leaving them with a sense of impending doom. The whistle seemed to call to them, beckoning them deeper into the woods. Emily shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around herself. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end. She didn't like this, not one bit. But Jake, usually the cautious one, was mesmerized. He stood up, his eyes glazed over. He took a step towards the darkness, drawn by the eerie tune.
Jake, wait!
Mia cried out, reaching for him, but it was too late. Jake walked into the shadows, following the sound of the whistle. He didn't even turn back. 1 minute he was there, bathed in the firelight. The next, he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. The whistle faded too, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake.
Jake, where are you?
Fear coiled around their chests like a cold serpent, tightening its grip with every passing second. The forest seemed to breathe with them, its dark tendrils reaching out, whispering secrets of the unknown. They were alone in the woods, the darkness pressing in on them from all sides. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent shivers down their spines. The night was alive, and it was watching them. The campfire, once a source of warmth and comfort, now seemed small and insignificant against the vast unknown darkness. Its flickering flames cast eerie shadows, dancing on the trees, making the forest seem even more menacing.
What do we do? The question hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty and fear. They looked at each other, searching for answers in the darkness.
Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. "We can't stay here," she said, her eyes darting around, trying to pierce the impenetrable blackness.
We have to find him. The determination in his voice was clear, cutting through the fear that gripped them all. They couldn't leave Jake out there, alone in the dark.
Sam said, his face grim. He grabbed a burning branch from the fire, creating a makeshift torch. The light from the torch flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own.
Jake, can you hear me? His voice was desperate, echoing through the trees, bouncing back at them as if the forest itself was mocking their efforts.
He yelled, his voice echoing through the trees. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with the weight of their fears and the unknown dangers lurking in the shadows. They had to keep moving, had to find Jake before it was too late. They searched for what felt like hours, their fear growing with every passing moment. The woods were alive with unseen creatures, their eyes gleaming in the darkness. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent shivers down their spines. But there was no sign of Jake, no answer to their calls but the mournful hoot of an owl. The whistle remained silent, leaving them alone with their terror. Emily stumbled over a root, falling to her knees. Tears streamed down her face, blurring her vision. She was so scared she could barely breathe. This wasn't happening. It was just a nightmare, a terrible, horrible nightmare.
We'll never find him. We're going to be lost out here forever.
Mark helped her to her feet, his own fear masked by a forced sense of calm. He had to be strong for Emily, for Mia, for himself.
We can't give up. We have to keep looking.
But even as he spoke, he felt a knot of despair tightening in his gut. They were lost, hopelessly lost, and something was hunting them. He could feel it watching them from the shadows, toying with them, waiting. And then he heard it again, the faintest whisper of a melody, carried on the wind, the whistle. It was calling to him now, luring him in. He couldn't help himself. He had to find out what it was. He had to know what happened to Jake. Taking a deep breath, he plunged into the darkness, following the sound of the whistle.
Mark, no!
Mia screamed, reaching out for him. But he was already gone, swallowed by the darkness, just like Jake. Mia and Emily stood there, frozen in terror, the dying embers of the campfire casting long, eerie shadows around them. They were alone now, truly alone. The whistle grew louder, closer, beckoning them forward. It was a sound that seemed to pierce the very fabric of the night, echoing through the trees and sending shivers down their spines. The forest, usually a place of serene beauty, had transformed into a realm of shadows and whispers. Mia and Emily exchanged a look, a silent understanding passing between them. Their eyes, wide with fear, reflected the pale moonlight filtering through the dense canopy above. They didn't need words to communicate the urgency of their situation. Their shared terror was enough. They had to escape, now. The realization hit them like a bolt of lightning, igniting a primal instinct to flee. The forest, once a familiar and comforting place, now felt like a labyrinth of nightmares. Turning, they ran through the darkness, their hearts pounding in their chests. Each step was a desperate attempt to put distance between themselves and the unseen menace. The branches clawed at their clothes, the underbrush snagging their feet, but they pressed on, driven by sheer survival. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs screamed for mercy. Every breath was a struggle, every muscle in their bodies protesting the relentless pace. Yet the fear of what might be behind them was a far greater pain than their physical exhaustion. But the woods seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness closing in around them. It was as if the forest itself was conspiring to trap them, the trees growing denser, the path more treacherous. The oppressive darkness felt almost tangible, a living entity that sought to consume them. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the whistle stopped. The abrupt cessation of sound was jarring, leaving a void that was almost deafening in its intensity. They halted, their breaths ragged, ears straining to catch any hint of movement. Silence descended once more, heavy and absolute. It was a silence that seemed to press down on them, amplifying the pounding of their hearts and the rustle of leaves underfoot. The absence of the whistle was almost more terrifying than its presence, but it wasn't a comforting silence. It was a silence filled with unspoken threats, a silence that hinted at unseen dangers lurking just beyond their vision. The forest, now eerily quiet, felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. It was the silence of something watching, waiting. The sensation of being observed was almost palpable, a prickling at the back of their necks. They knew they were not alone, that something or someone was out there, hidden in the shadows, biding its time. The forest had become a place of dread, and the silence was its most potent weapon.